Welcome back to this week's episode of Thoroughly Entertained. Please go to our website, thoroughllyentertained.com, and sign up for our summer movie guide so that you know what's happening every week at the theater. This week, Krista and I saw the new thriller, White House Down, as well as Joss Whedon's adaptation of Much Ado About Nothing.
In White House Down, D.C. cop John Cale and his daughter get trapped in the White House as terrorists try to kidnap the president.
So before we start talking about White House Down, we wanted to ask our question of the week, and that is, what is your favorite 4th of July movie? Krista?
I'd have to say Independence Day. There's nothing quite like the destruction of those aliens, and Will Smith was pretty brave.
Yeah, I would also say Independence Day is my favorite 4th of July movie, if for no other reason than Bill Pullman's speech as the president right before they launched the final offensive. One of my favorite speeches in the history of movies.
It's an excellent one.
All right, so we saw White House Down, and I really enjoyed this movie a lot more than I was expecting to. What were your thoughts on it?
Absolutely. I did not expect to like this movie. Let's be honest, we've had a lot of action movies this summer, which is what you expect for summer movie fair, but, and I just was sort of ho-hum about it. But I will say, I was really entertained. It had a nice build-up with backstory, getting to know some of the characters, the primary characters, before the big action really set in. And I appreciated that they spent enough time doing that, so that when we got to the action sequences, we felt more for the characters. There was more emotion. And so, as a whole, I thought it was an excellent summer movie.
Yeah, it was really smart the way they did that. Because you get almost, would you say, 20 to 25 minutes of character work at the beginning of the film, you are invested in these people. You feel like you know them a little bit. You feel like you understand how they'll react in certain situations.
Yeah,
you're rooting for them. Channing Tatum is excellent in this movie. Again, everything the guy does is better than the last thing that he did. I'm really impressed with how versatile he is, how likable he is on screen. John Cale feels like a guy that you know because Channing Tatum plays him that way, and I think that makes it excellent, and it's very easy to root for him as this movie goes forward.
Yeah, he did an excellent job, and as a whole, I thought the acting was strong.
Yeah.
I will say, the one downside for me was I thought that Jamie Foxx was too physical of a president of the United States, and didn't really convey the nerdy academic that they wanted him to be. And I don't know if he could have done it better or if they just needed someone else to make that role feel more believable for me.
Yeah, one of the things you mentioned is they do put scenes in there like where he's holding a gun and he has to go into his pockets to put his glasses on. And there's another scene where that you see in the trailer where he drops the rocket launcher after he shoots it because it shakes out of his hands. And it seems like they're like, oh, hey, by the way, this guy's not an action star, just remember. He's just the president of the United States. We get why those scenes were in there, but it would have been a little bit easier if they would have written him just a little bit more timid and a little bit more academic than he's always just so brave and charges in. I agree with you there. They could have shaped that character a little bit differently to make it more effective.
But as a whole, I thought it was excellent. I give the movie a strong B+ because it's one of the more because it had a good backstory and emotional connections in the middle of all of the action. That's why I gave it a strong B+.
Yeah, I agree. I gave it a B. I downgraded it just a little bit because I agree with the flaws with Jamie Foxx's portrayal of the president. But I also thought that some of the action sequences were a little. And agree. They're a little bit ludicrous. Although
come on, look at Fast and the Furious. You gave a strong B+, and that is way more implausible than this movie.
But Fast and the Furious is a series of 6 movies that has never pretended even for a second that there was any realism in this. This is a movie that's trying to realistically tug at your heartstrings, so that when I see a guy dodge 1,000 machine gun bullets, he could have been grazed by 1 or 2 of them and made it a little bit more believable for me. But overall, I gave it a really strong B, and it's a much better movie than I expected it to be. In Joss Whedon's adaptation of the classic Shakespearean comedy Much Ado About Nothing, we track the love affair of 2 couples, Claudio and Hero, and Beatrice and Benedict.
All right, so now for Joss Whedon's adaptation of Much Ado About Nothing. So, in this particular movie, really the central characters are Benedict and Beatrice, and they're played by Alexis Denisof and Amy Acker, and they are really strong in this role. Now, I can't imagine that many of our viewers are probably familiar with the actors in this movie.
Right.
They are solid actors that come from previous works with Joss Whedon, like Angel or Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Firefly.
Or Dollhouse or, the myriad things, all those things.
So these are actors that you'll recognize, but you're not going to, generally probably know a ton about, which is a shame because they are strong actors, and this is a well-acted and an interesting and funny adaptation.
Yeah, and it's really impressive that Joss Whedon was able to do this during a 12-day break while he was working on the Avengers. I mean, to put together a film like this in 12 days, he shot it at his house. He basically pulled together a bunch of favors from his friends to act in it. And he even says, he goes, making this movie was my vacation from how much hard work it was to do the Avengers. And it's impressive that he was able to pull it together in 12 days. I agree with you. It is a crime that these actors aren't more famous, that only people that are familiar with Joss Whedon's work will know these guys. Other than Nathan Fillion, it's mostly a cast of, hey, it's that guy from that thing. It's not a lot of name. There's not a lot of name power over it, but it's well acted. It's funny. It's my favorite Shakespeare play. That and Taming of the Shrew are probably my two favorites. So it's material I like to begin with.
Right. As much as we both liked the movie, we are huge fans of this particular adaptation. Of this particular play.
Right.
But the greatest adaptation was made in 1993. Done by Kenneth Branagh, and it starred Kenneth Branagh, Emma Thompson, Denzel Washington, Keanu Reeves. Kate Beckinsale made her film debut in this movie. Michael Keaton is in it. And it's a
awesome
rock star cast, and it is just so delightful that there was no way that I couldn't compare that version with this modern retake.
Yeah, and part of the reason why this modern retelling suffers a little bit is it just doesn't have that loose abandon or joy or willful silliness that the original has. This is a Shakespeare comedy, and there are times when it's funny because the actors are skilled and they deliver the dialogue well, but, it doesn't have that sense, it doesn't have that really freewheeling sense of adventure that the previous adaptation does. And because of that, it's just not as much fun to watch. It just isn't. And there's also, because of the restrictions of the budget and the timing and the space, a few of the scenes in this new remake seem a little bit clumsy and kind of forced together, whereas the original had, sprawling sets and gigantic things. And so it's almost not fair to compare the two, but when you're dealing with the same source material, it's impossible not to.
Right. So I'm imagining that most people did not see or don't remember the 1993 version, but since I own it and love it, it's just hard for me not to compare the two. So as much as I enjoyed and think that you should see Much Ado About Nothing, because it warrants viewership, and I think it's a great modern take on this particular story, it does suffer in comparison with the older version.
Yeah, and because of that reason, for me, like I said, I think there's at least a full grade difference between the two films. And so, since I would have given the previous Kenneth Branagh version an A, I can't give this anything higher than a B-.
And I gave it a solid B because it's strong acting and interesting. It's all shot in black and white, which I liked stylistically. I thought it worked in this instance, and so definitely you should check it out. It's worth seeing.
Yeah, but maybe a Netflix rental instead of paying to see it in the theater, I would say.
Well, thanks for watching this week's episode of Thoroughly Entertained. Next week, we'll be watching The Lone Ranger, Despicable Me 2, and The Way, Way Back. As always, go to our website at thoroughlyentertained.com, sign up for our summer movie guide so that you know everything that's happening at the movies this summer. And please join us next week as we are on our quest to be thoroughly entertained.